news in the trial of Sean Diddy Combs. For more, let's bring in MSNBC's Lisa Rubin. Lisa, what do we know?
Well, Lisa, what we know is that the jurors have told the judge here, Judge Arun Subramanian of the Southern District of New York, that they have reached a verdict on counts 2, 3, 4, and 5. Those are 4 of the 5 charges against Sean Combs. But they have been unable thus far to reach a verdict on the first, and some might say the most important count. That's the count that charges Combs with a racketeering conspiracy involving a variety of allegedly unlawful acts over a span of more than a decade. Those acts include kidnapping, arson, bribery, and then, of course, sex trafficking and transportation to commit prostitution.
Okay, Lisa, we knew that there was the possibility that this was going to be the most complex of the charges. Talk us through why that is.
I think, Alicia, part of what's complicated here, RICO is always complicated, but part of what's complicated here is twofold. One, Combs was alleged to have used his business associates in committing crimes. In order to have a racketeering conspiracy, you have to have more than one person who has conspired to commit more than one crime. I'm sorry, I'm hearing myself in my ear. But aside from conspiring to commit more than one crime, you also have to show that there is an enterprise. And here, because Combs worked with many of the people who he employed through his legitimate operations, that's different from the usual RICO context in which we think about, for example, organized crime or street gangs. Here, his co-conspirators were members of his security team or his chief of staff, his personal assistants. Those were the people that the prosecution said were his co-conspirators here. The other thing that's particularly complicated is that the women he is alleged to have sex trafficked were, in most of the cases, people who were involved in years-long consensual romantic relationships with him. That's something that the prosecution doesn't contest. What they say, on the other hand, is that over time, Combs used a combination of force, fraud, and coercion to get them to participate in a bunch of unwanted, unconsensual sex acts that were commercial by virtue of the fact that he also brought in prostitutes or escorts to participate in those with him. So the combination of the sort of interwoven consensual and non-consensual relationships and the fact that people in his business life are his alleged co-conspirators is part of what makes this such a complicated case, Alicia.
Lisa, can you remind us what it is that we know about this jury and what you make of the amount of time that they spent deliberating these charges?
The jury is composed, from what I remember, of more women than men. The other thing, though, that I think is important is that they've only been deliberating for a short period of time. It's Tuesday. They started their deliberations yesterday. They have sent a variety of different notes looking for clarification from the judge. One thing I thought was particularly interesting is that one of what lawyers call the predicate acts, meaning one of the crimes that the conspiracy is alleged to have agreed to commit, is drug distribution. And they asked a question about what it meant to distribute drugs. The prosecution said in both their closing argument and in their rebuttal, drug distribution for purposes of federal law is nothing more complicated than obtaining or possessing drugs and giving them to another person. They alleged, and they had people testify to the fact, that Sean Combs was constantly plying his 2 ex-girlfriends, Cassie Ventura and a woman known only to the jury and to us as Jane, with a variety of different kinds of drugs, from ketamine to cocaine to MDMA, which we know as ecstasy. And the jurors wanted to know, well, if somebody just hands that to somebody else and they ask for that, is that what the law would consider drug distribution? To me, that signified that they hadn't necessarily reached a verdict that Sean Combs was guilty of either sex trafficking or transporting people for the purposes of prostitution. Those are the standalone charges against Sean Combs. Counts 2 through 5 involve a count each of sex trafficking and transportation with the intent to commit prostitution vis-a-vis his 2 ex-girlfriends, Cassie Ventura and the woman known as Jane.